Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I thought I would film a Q&A themed on GCSEs because I know that we are in the last stretch, it seems, you know, a couple of months before the exams, and I have had a few people come and ask me similar sort of questions, or I put on my story last night, if you have any more questions then let me know. And so I've got a few that I thought maybe a lot more than one person has, you know, that needs answering, so I'll see what I can do. So the first question I've got is, what did you do before and after exams? So I'm guessing this is like what I do. Well, I'm going to take this as what I do to de-stress after and before exams and how to prepare. So the night before, I don't do like any revision on a particular topic, but say if I've got a science exam the next day, I'll go through all of my revision resources that I've made, so say my mind maps for me, and I would just have a read through and make it a really chilled out night because I don't want to stress myself out too much. I always feel like when I focus on something really like precise within a unit, so for example, say if I had the science exam tomorrow but I decided to focus on chromatography for the night, I would then stress myself out more because I'd be like, well, I've only focused on that one thing and I'm going to fail everything else. And yeah, so I didn't do anything particular except from if I had a really difficult topic I might go over it, but the majority of my revision that evening would be to just go over everything that I've made in preparation for the exam and just give myself that quick recap to give myself some reassurance, almost like, yes, okay, you've got this, you're fine. And then also that night I would take some time to de-stress, so I would do a workout, I would do some stretching, I would chill out, just watch a movie or have some time on social media. I know it's not going to sound like the most proactive thing you could be doing, but it's going to keep you calm and kind of not get into the exam brain too early, because if you're in that zone for too long you're just going to stress out so much. The morning before an exam, again, I'll do some sort of exercise or stretching to get myself woken up properly so that I'm not walking in the exam hall half asleep, but also to, again, de-stress and just keep myself as active as possible. I would also do basically a shorter version of what I'd done the night before, basically just going over my revision resources once more, maybe looking at my difficult topics, so for things that I maybe struggled on a bit more, just to, again, reassure myself that I'm going to be okay. And then lastly, when I had my GCSEs, I was with my friends for like the hour before the exam, so we would just sit and chat. We might do some work like revision, so quizzing each other, but then we would also just chat and chill out and just pretend that we didn't have an exam coming up, because again, it helps you de-stress. And then after an exam, I would run as fast as I can away from that exam hall. No, I'm joking. Right, so I did walk away from the exam hall nice and calmly, but I would also just, again, have a chat with my friends about random things. And for my mocks, I would sit by a radiator because the exam hall was freezing, so we'd all like sit by a radiator huddled up, just like going, oh, I'm cold, like that wasn't too bad, or that was a terrible exam, or that was great, or whatever it was. But one thing I really don't want you to do is go and compare your answers to other people, because I don't know whether you've heard this, but I've mentioned it previously. My French writing exam, my actual GCSE one, I thought I'd done great, and then I went on Twitter and thought I'd failed it because everyone was writing something different, and I was like, oh my god, I've obviously done everything wrong because everything else is completely right on Twitter. Yeah, don't do that. I ended up, it was fine, but it's going online or talking to other people about questions, and then you suddenly work your brain up and you're just going to stress yourself out so much about something you can't control anymore. So once you've sat that exam, there's no point worrying about it because you've done what you've done and there's nothing else you can do. Question number 2 is, when you can't be asked, how do you start revising? Now, I think the first question you need to ask yourself when you're in this position is, why do you need to revise? Why is it that you've told yourself, because obviously this person knows that they need to start revising and they know it's important, but they just don't have the effort or don't have the motivation. So you need to ask yourself why and give yourself that purpose to why you're doing such, you know, doing your revision each night, or you're trying to get those grades, because otherwise there's no purpose, there's no motivation behind it. So it might be that you're doing it to get a job, or because you want to just feel accomplished, or you want to prove something to other people, which probably isn't the best one, but you know, we all have our own reasons. So it's up to you. You need to sit down with yourself and figure out why you're revising and why you should be revising, and that can maybe start helping you, you know, get into the swing of things. How you then do that is up to you. So I would say that if you're not feeling very motivated, the first thing you could do is write a list of the things that you need to get done, and then just pick out one thing and start it for just 2 minutes and see what you can do. If you're really not in the mood, then don't try and force yourself to do it, because then you're building like a negative opinion on studying, and we don't want to have to do that. So try and keep it as, I don't know, as positive as you can by just trying to do one thing, seeing how far you get. If you suddenly get into the swing of things, then carry on going. If not, try something else. And if none of them work, then just leave it for a while, take a break, go and do something else. Maybe go and do some exercise to warm yourself up and wake yourself up, because maybe the reason why you're not feeling motivated is because you're too tired. So think about the other things that are going on in your life that you can maybe change, and you know, see if that can impact the way you're feeling about studying. I also want to say that I know it sounds harsh, but sometimes we've just got to have discipline. So if you want to get there but you're not feeling very motivated, just tell yourself, well, if I don't do this, then I'm not going to get there. You know, you're not going to get that job that you want, you're not going to get that grade that you want. So be harsh on yourself to an extent, obviously, but recognize that you have to have some sort of discipline. You can't say that every time you don't feel like studying, you're not going to go study, because that's not going to get you anywhere. Because to be honest, whoever feels like studying, not many people. I don't ever wake up and go, do you know what, I'm going to read 3 hours of Shakespeare tonight. No, but you know, some days that's what it takes to get through an English lit exam. So recognize that although it is good to kind of study in the best moods that you can so that you don't associate with negative feelings, but make sure that you're being harsh on yourself, you're being strict on yourself, and that's how you're going to get to where you want to be. Question number 3, how many hours of revision did you do each week in year 11? Now, I'm always a bit funny about this question, and it's one of the most frequently asked ones, because I get it, you want someone to base your life, your studying around, and especially if someone who has the grades that you want to have, then you might want to try and change your life to adapt to what they do. But what I want to stress is that counting the number of hours you study is not the way to go. You need to figure out how you most effectively study and look at that instead. So for me, it really varied week to week, and it also depended on what I had going on in that week. If I had mocks or exams or coursework deadlines, anything like that, that would alter how many hours I spent on certain subjects. And I never measured the amount of hours, so I couldn't actually tell you. But I know that for certain subjects I spent longer than others. So for example, art. Who's surprised? No one at this point. I've talked about it in almost all of my videos. Art took up a lot of my time. Compared to, say, I don't know, maths, I realised that I did a lot of revision in my lessons anyway, because we finished our spec early, our class. So I didn't spend as much time on maths outside of school as I would the other subjects such as science. So it really depended on the subjects, how confident you feel on each of those. So say if you've got a test the next day on science, you're not going to spend 3 hours the night before studying English, are you? So you need to look at your own timetable and the things coming up in your calendar that mean that you're going to switch your hours around. One thing I never did is I never told myself, right, I'm going to do 2 hours of revision tonight, because I don't know about you, but that meant that I would pick a really easy thing and draw it out for 2 hours instead of thinking, okay, I need to do this, and then I need to do some English, and then some French revision, and then finish off with some science. If I had that on my to-do list, then I was more likely to get it all done, because I had several things to tick off, and I like ticking things off my to-do list. And it also meant that I actually got more done, because I wasn't drawing it out in a longer period of time than it needed to be. So yeah, although I don't have set hours so that I can tell you, okay, I did 3 hours that night and 2 hours another night, I made sure that almost every single day I tried to do something, no matter what subject it was, no matter what it, if it was homework, revision, some coursework, whatever it was, I tried to do something each night, and that kept it consistent. And it meant that throughout the week I did do quite a few hours of work, but they were spread out and they didn't feel like more like the amount of hours that they were. Question number 4, do you have any English essays you can show me? And for that, unfortunately, the answer is no, because I'm not giving out my English essays, but I have some places that you can go to if you want some example essays. So for me, Mr. Bruff's YouTube channel, he sometimes analysed or marked some students' work that they had sent in for him. So if you are on, I know I was on AQA, so if you're on that, then that's particularly good. But even if you just want to develop your essay writing skills, that's a great place to go, because obviously he is a teacher, he is qualified to say, okay, this is good, this is not so good, this is what they could do to improve, and you know, you might pick up some good things. The next best place for, in fact, the best place for example essays is yourself. So I know it sounds like, you know, too much work. You're just going to grab someone else's essays and try and copy their style. But truth is, everyone writes differently. And you know that because when you read an example essay that's not your own, you sometimes feel like, oh, I could never write that because they've used words that I don't know. But the thing is that you know words that they don't know, and you know phrases that they don't know, and your quotes for different texts will be different, and your layers of analysis will be different, and the concepts you bring in will be different. So you need essays that are going to be easy for you to revise from, and you need, if you're wanting to build up your essay writing skills, then the best way to do that is by practicing it yourself. So my advice is, although I won't be giving out my own essays, try and write your own. Even if you think it's rubbish, hand it into your teacher and get your feedback, and then you can redraft and work from there. It's going to be so much more valuable to you than reading someone else's essays. I do also have a video on the structure of the essays, that nearly all of my essays in English Lit, so if you want to watch that, then I'll link that either up here or in the description, or you can find it on my channel. So yeah, so although I won't be giving out the essays, there are many places that you can go to get just as valuable resources. Question 5, when did you start revising for GCSEs? So for me, this is always a bit difficult to answer because I don't think about a definitive time that I started revising. I know it kind of sounds cliche, but I've just always known that I needed to revise for certain things. So say in year 9, when we had a topic test, I would revise for that topic test. It wouldn't be nearly as much work as I did in year 11, but I still knew that revising was important. So I've always been that student that's been, you know, prepared for things, even though sometimes my life was just a mess. But I would say that I knew that year 10 was a really important year because it was like the foundation of our GCSE years. So I started to create my revision sort of resources around then. And although I didn't use any of them in year 11, they aided my revision. They, like, you know, I was still revising as I was creating these flashcards that were way too pretty, and you know, they weren't getting the information down, I was just making them look nice. Anywho, I still revised the content that I was writing down. So I would say that I started revising in year 10, but really the revision resources that I made for my GCSEs were made in year 11, and they were made around mock time. I was not very prepared in that sense because I was making like mind maps a couple of days before my exams, but it worked. I don't know what to say about that. I think the sooner you can start revising, the better. But if you've got to, say, the beginning of year 11 and you're now panicking because I've said I started revising in year 9 or year 10, then don't worry, because I didn't use any of the revision resources that I made earlier in year 11. Once again, if you want some more detail on that, I do have a video on when and how to start revising. So if you're really stuck on how to get into the flow of revising and put it into your routine for good, then please check that video out. Question 6, how do I prepare for English Lit questions? Now, it honestly depends on your exam board, because I know that different exams have different ways of asking the questions, but for me I was on AQA, so I'll kind of take it from this angle. And the way I prepared for English Lit questions was by writing practice essays, by planning out different essay structures. So although I wouldn't write out all the essays that I planned, I would just jot down the quotes that I would use, the bits of context that I could bring into, and like my argument throughout. And I would also just make sure I had a vague idea of what I would write for each theme and each character within a text. So although you'll never, you know, have all of the answers to every single question that could possibly get asked, by knowing what you would write for each theme and each character, you've got a pretty good range of quotes, context and analysis that you can use in almost every essay. And you will realise that a lot of them will overlap. So Sheila and Eric might fall under the same theme, and then you've also got the quotes that you've made for their individual characters. So it all intertwines, and it'll mean that you need to remember less than you thought, because if I say to you, you need to remember 5 quotes for each theme and 5 quotes for each character, that's a lot. But if I told you need to know 5 quotes overall that cover quite a few different themes and characters, that's not so bad. Question 7, how do I revisit notes? So the key for this, I would say, and the way that I kind of train myself into revisiting my notes, is put them in a form that you'll want to revisit them in. There's no point writing pages of notes if you don't learn by reading. So I made mind maps because for me that was the correct way of, you know, taking in all that information. I do quite well when I just read through information and then it's in a visual way that I can keep, you know, flicking between different subjects, so it just worked for me. Maybe if you find that when you're reading you start switching off, try something that's maybe more active recall based. So for example, question and answer flashcards. So write your questions on one side and your answer on the other. So your notes could be that. So it's up to you on how you revise, and that's going to affect how you revisit your notes, but make sure that what you're writing is going to be useful for you in the future. There's no point writing loads of stuff if you're never going to read it ever again. And lastly, number 8, did you do science past papers? And the short answer is yes. I did science or past papers for almost every single subject except from like art and other things that didn't really have past papers, but they are so useful because not only do you get to practice, you know, answering exam style questions, but you also, if you then mark your answers, you know exactly what the mark scheme is looking for, and that means that when you get into an actual exam you have a vague idea of what you should write down, even if the question isn't too clear. So yes, practice papers are so good, and they're also a great way just to kind of identify any gaps in your knowledge. Maybe not with like the different units and the different subtopics, because an exam cannot, you know, mark everything in one spec, but what you might find that it tells you is which style of question you need to work on. So I know for me, say in geography, I would never get full marks on a 6-mark question, and I do fine on like the 9 markers and the 4 markers. So I then practice a load of 6 markers until I got higher marks. For say science, you might find out that you do fine on the maths based questions, but the longer 6-mark questions are where you fall down on, so you might want to work on that. It honestly depends on, you know, obviously what your strengths and weaknesses are, but the exam papers are a great way to kind of identify which areas you need to work on. So I hope those questions and answers have been useful for you. If you have any more, then leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Right now, whilst I'm filming this, we're almost at 300 subscribers, which is amazing. So please hit subscribe if you haven't already. And I've already said that, sorry. I'll see you next week. Bye!